Through the course of my life, every once in a while I've come across people who are more or less fed up with the world, or at least the society in which they live, or maybe even just their own lot in life, and somewhat unseriously threaten to move out into the woods or way, way, way up north. Presumably just to be alone, unbothered by the irritations of the modern world, cut off from the seeming ocean of demands of everyone around them, just to get away from it all, disconnected from the mistakes of the past, undisturbed by seemingly irreconcilable relationships, to enter into that uncomplicated, simpler life, where phones don't ring and there are no computers or smart devices that entice you into re-engaging with the stresses of modern-day living, somewhere where you can get away from it all. When I lived in Toronto, such people talked about these fringes of their world being somewhere near to where we live now. And with the outpouring of people from the city here to the growing, or from there to the growing communities of Innisfil and Barrie, some of those same people who relocated here are inspired to think of going further to so-called cottage country, although most of the houses I see north of here aren't cottages by my old definition of cottage. It's more like a northern suburb. And so even there people are moved to inspired to think of moving to other places even further north, where presumably absolutely nobody can bother you. We might well ask, is that possible? Is it really all that desirable? Well, as you know, it doesn't matter how far up or down or out there you go, you aren't really alone. You are on or next to somebody's land, somebody else's home, and while you may seldom see them and perhaps even never, you have entered into a new set of relationships where you may not be talking to other human beings, but you have not left the reality of being related to the rest of humanity behind you, much as some of us might want to think otherwise. No man or woman is an island, to gender neutralize a quote of the 16th century Anglican poet John Donne. The reality of being human is such that we are always in some kind of relationship with our fellows, albeit from a greater or lesser distance. So the task of living is really first and foremost about how we deal with our relationships, how we get along with one another, or not. To put it succinctly, other people are what life is all about. The other day I saw that well-known movie Captain Phillips about the American container ship that gets taken over by Somali pirates. Starring Tom Hanks, I understand it is based on the true story of this hijacking that took place about 5 years ago off the East African coast. Perhaps what is most remarkable about it is the seeming ease with which the story bridges the existence of the lead pirate, who is Barkhad Abdi, the actor, who lives literally on the other side of the world, from the home of the captain of this ship carrying millions of dollars worth of cargo. A short plane ride away from a comfortable American suburb to being aboard this ship, literally on the other side of the world, sailing perhaps tantalizingly close to some of the most impoverished and unpleasant living conditions in the world. Conditions in Somalia which apparently have given birth to the routine inclination to try to seize such huge ships for quick gain, driven by gun-touting, speedboat-owning, cruel warlords And the story thus reveals the intersection of the lives of these poor drug consumers, and in some cases very young guys, wielding guns aboard rickety fast boats, and the crew of this multi-million-dollar ship just trying to do their jobs without anybody getting hurt. An otherwise highly improbable encounter of two human beings who live and breathe and eat and have parents and brothers and sisters just like one another, but arise from utterly different circumstances, and they come face to face. I guess that is what life is all about, and it is really what life is at its core, coming face to face with others. Some people like ourselves, and some people much less so, and everyone in between. And then, of course, there are questions that immediately surface. How do we, or should we, do that? How do we relate? Should we go out and seek it, or should we go further and further up north, if I can use that metaphor? The Christian faith is rather clear about Jesus' response. If there is one thing that is obvious about Jesus' existence, it is that he never seems to hide, now does he? Oh, there are plenty of people around him who would really like him to hide, and they would like to make arrangements for his hiddenness, but he himself never seems to seek isolation from those who are coming after him, for good or for ill. Indeed, even in death, following the Easter of his existence, Jesus is not to be hidden from his disciples, as we heard read from the book of John this morning. Disciples gathered behind a locked door. Even the most doubting, who wasn't there, Thomas, and Jesus re-emerged later from behind a closed door. He was not to be shut out. Concluding with that infamous line, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." What a notion, being in relation with Jesus even when we don't see him. Being in relationship with him, way up north, on the other side of the world. People relating to Christ even in the worst and most desperate of conditions. Well, as you may note from today's bulletin, today is Mission Awareness Sunday. A little over 10 years ago, our denomination issued a handbook on missions in which they note that the word mission does not appear in the Bible. But it is the foundation for our faith tradition and Jesus' ministry. And then this booklet goes on to quote a whole list of biblical passages that drive home the point that human beings are in relationship to one another and God. This isn't something we have the luxury of opting out of. Our condition and the conditions of other human beings in the world are intertwined and interdependent. We are our brother's keepers, to put it succinctly. Thus, the Old Testament is full of biblical references to the Hebrews' pursuit of God's righteousness or justice, shalom. And the New Testament expands upon Jesus' teaching about the reign of God, where everyone enjoys abundant life, full of love for God, ourselves, and our neighbor. And so Jesus urges us, as they point out, to realize that blessed are the poor in spirit, and worth spending time over. And he declares in another place, "I was hungry, and you gave me food." And Jesus elsewhere commands at another time, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, and the Spirit of the Lord is upon me." Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and all your mind, and all your soul. For God so loved the world and then you will be my witnesses. In all these references and in the life of Christ himself, we witness God reconciling himself to the world. It is all about being in relationship with one another. Now, I'm not trying to insinuate that this challenge of meeting others is always a breeze or a cakewalk. We witness great tension, for example, this day in the country of the Ukraine, on the Ukrainian-Russian border, with billions of dollars in assets reportedly frozen by the West to inspire the Russian leadership to ease off. Disagreements among nations and communities and individuals would seem to be endemic to what it is to be human. Some seem generous, some seem greedy, and then there is the whole gamut in between. But the thought of such states of affairs should not inspire us to go further and further up north, you might say, with all due respect to people who live in Timmins and Churchill Falls and Nunavut and Yellowknife and all those places way up there. No, our calling, like that of the Old Testament prophet Amos, is clear: to seek the Lord and to live and establish justice. This we don't do alone, but in relationship with one another, much as we might be inclined to think that it is what we most like to do. Sometimes our society doesn't want to call a spade, as they say. The reason people don't go to church as much as they used to 3 decades or so ago is not because of the music or people like me, or the various limited styles of worshiping God that may be offered in the sanctuaries of the world all around us. No, one of the primary reasons is that people are often powerfully inclined to avoid one another. For if you avoid human encounters, that means you won't meet an argument, or a demand, or some other presumed anticipated unpleasantness. But you also miss most of what is richest in life. The Spirit of God working within and among us all. Even the ones that seem most unlike ourselves present that. If you are unwilling to risk anything, you can be sure you're going to gain nothing. I like how the prolific British writer and historian Arnold Toynbee put it in the closing chapter of his book, An Historian's Approach to Religion. Professor Toynbee said, "No human soul can pass through this life without being challenged to grapple with the mystery of the universe. If the distinctively human impulse of curiosity does not bring us to that point, experience will drive us to it. Above all, the experience of suffering." And then, perhaps most revealing for us on this day of mission awareness, he says, the missions of the higher religions are not competitive. They are complementary. We can believe in our own religion without having to feel that it is the sole repository of truth. The Christian church, we hope, has learned that it is all about our relationship with others in the world. It is not about imposing some kind of program forcibly on others. It is about offering the gift of love. For love, as the Apostle Paul reminds us, is that gift that never fails. And love is that gift we do not seek by ourselves, but with and through others, as different as they or we may be. With the internet these days, it's amazing what you can find yourself doing and listening to on outfits like YouTube. The other day, I forget how I got there, but anyway, I ended up listening to the speech of the German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier. He was giving it to the Brookings Institute in the United States, which I gather is fairly well respected. His speech was interesting in that he referred to how the world is so very much different for his daughter than for people of his generation. That in fact she has a whole set of values that are nearly entirely different from his own. Thus she is in a relationship with the world which is completely changed. Perhaps not coincidentally, that container ship captain from the movie I referred to earlier had a conversation with his wife on the way to the plane that was to take him to the boat about their children and how they will come to relate to the world, and it reflected the same feeling. They said, "This is our life. It just seems like the world is moving so fast, and right now things are changing so much. It's not going to be easy for our kids." How many of us have heard that? It's not going to be easy for our kids. They'll be going into a different world than the one you and I came into. Well, I hate to go against the flow, but I find myself not wholly endorsing the urging of this sentiment that would seem to be ever so prevalent in our world. With all due respect to those who believe it, this sentiment is what drives people into a bunker-seeking mentality. Perhaps the reasons for people hiding has changed, but the inclination to hide has remained the same. The world has ever been thus. We need to remember, as difficult as things can get, there are incredibly wonderful things in life. Loving people all around us. Unrealized potential at virtually every turn. There is potential for good beyond our capacity to imagine. But our society is so driven to run for the hills against the supposed bad things to come. It makes it kind of hard to enjoy life. But life is and can be and will be good and is intended to be enjoyed. And we are reminded this day that it is so especially good when we remember that we have a purpose, a mission in life. And that is, even amidst the difficulties and sufferings in the world, to attend to what the prophet Isaiah encouraged, as noted in your calendar. And when you turn to the right, or when you turn to the left, your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." A divine word. To quote another movie, your mission, if you decide to accept it, is to generously and optimistically relate to the world just as Christ himself did, in the resurrected spirit, with a love and with such gifts as God alone can provide. And the world will meet you with all its mystery and infiniteness, with a potential of joy arising like nothing else.